Jason, it's great to have you on the show. I'm super excited to get to know more about death therapy and just to get to know you, man. So how's your day going?
Oh, it's going great, man. Thanks for having me. I'm really honored.
Oh, well, that may be misplaced, but still, that's okay. We're all good with that.
Yeah, totally.
Oh man, so you are part of a band that kind of has a distinction that not many bands that claim that you're just a 2-member band, which I'm sure. I think I actually saw a quote from you somewhere saying, "Well, the question, of course, instantly becomes in every single interview: how in the world do you pull this off live?" So, not to be different, how do you do that kind of thing live?
Yeah. So, funny story about that, real quick.
Sure.
2-person band. We've actually run into a few places where I hit up somebody about, hey, let's do a show, and they're like, well, we don't really do shows with 2-person bands. It's not really a band, is it? and I'm kind of like, well, wait a second. The only thing that's different about what we do is that I handle the guitar sound and the bass sound through the use of effects.
Right.
And pedals. Otherwise, it's me and the drummer. I do the vocals as well, and we play with a backing track. Now, back when I was starting out playing heavy metal music, to play with a backing track would have been blasphemy, and everybody would be like, oh, you're Milli Vanilli or something.
Mm-hmm.
But now, you pretty much don't go to a concert where a band you watch isn't using a backing track, so
right.
Of some kind. A lot of people may not know that, but when you hear a keyboard coming out from your favorite band and you look around on stage and there's not a keyboard player there, that's a tip that it's a backing track. So what we do is I use effects to get a distorted bass sound that kind of gives the illusion of a guitar as well, and just make it big and heavy and nasty. And then we have some keyboard stuff that comes on the loop, and yeah, it's rock and roll.
Cool. Now, did you have any bands that were a 2-person band that you looked at when you were thinking about the concept of this and said, yes, this can work because they do that?
Yeah, I mean, so our sound, our style, it's kind of hard to tell what you would call it, but we have industrial music influences, we have hard rock influences, heavy metal influences, and a 2-person band is actually not that odd in certain genres. So
right.
The White Stripes, for instance, have been around for more than a decade, and it's a 2-person band.
Mm-hmm.
There's a band out there called Royal Blood, which is probably more similar to what we do because it's a bass player and a drummer, as opposed to the White Stripes as a guitar player and a drummer.
Right.
And a few bands like that. But in the industrial music world, which is part of where our influence comes from, there's a really long history of bands that are just one guy or a DJ or a couple of guys with a drum machine, or something like that. So
mm-hmm.
we kind of pull the two together, a little bit of rock and roll. I'm actually playing the guitars and stuff like that. But then that little bit of that old school industrial feeling as well. So
sure thing. Yeah, and it's funny because I'm sure that we probably have some of the same things that we enjoyed from probably a lot of the same eras of that ilk, because I grew up listening to like Clank and Circle of Dust and Chatterbox.
Oh yeah, totally.
And Argyle Park and all that good stuff. And when I first heard the first Death Therapy song that I ran across online, I was like, yes, somebody's doing something like this that's good again.
Yeah, and we've gotten a lot of those kind of comparisons. Circle of Dust, Clank, especially, because I think, especially in the Christian music world, there really hasn't ever been much foray into, or successful foray into, industrial heavy music. There's just been a handful of bands, and I guess I'm pretty honored that people haven't written us off completely, and that they do, kind of quickly put us in that category. That's pretty humbling for me. So
right. Well, now you had mentioned that you said that it hasn't been much of a successful foray. Because I mean, there've been a few, but
yeah, there've been a few.
With that being the case, was that at all daunting thinking about taking this out of kind of more of just a concept and into a situation where you're putting out music and signing to a label and all that? Did that have any effect on the decision making for this?
Not really, because the fun part about this band for me is that I was in another band before this called Becoming The Archetype,
mm-hmm.
and that was a very planned out, technical, musically advanced. Everything was, you could write it all out on paper kind of thing before we ever played a note.
Right.
This has been much more of like I'm just going to write what comes out of me, and just kind of turn the turn the tape on, if kids know what tape is nowadays. push record on the laptop, right, and see what comes out. It turns out that what comes out of me when I'm just making music for the fun of it sounds a lot like what I listened to when I was in, my senior year of high school, early college, which is probably for most of us, that's kind of ingrained in us. That's the music that's part of our soul. So, I listen to a lot of that kind of stuff. I listened to bands like you were mentioning, but I also listened to bands like Living Sacrifice and heavier bands. So coming to this, it kind of came out as a blend. It's got the industrial flavor. It's got the groovy flavor, because I grew up on Project 86 as well. That really heavy bass tone, groovy, almost Rage Against the Machine kind of sound. And I think it all kind of comes together. At least I hope it does on our record. So.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I like about the record. It's in as much as I don't think there's any one thing that I dislike about it. I mean, because that's always kind of, I guess, the fear for consumers, maybe just as much as band, is when a band puts out an album where those two songs really sound the same. Mm-hmm. It's like, how many will people latch onto? Is it just going to be one track that people like, and are they going to say, yeah, do more of that, but the rest of this, just forget about it? But I like the fact that it's got variety, but yet it all feels good. It all feels enjoyable. It's not something where it just feels like maybe there's one redeeming factor amidst a plethora of different sounds.
There's a shortage now, I think, in the music industry of bands that, at least especially bands that are trying to get played on the radio, and bands that are trying to make it, to the next level per se, that really do a lot of variety in their music. The Beatles didn't have a problem with that in the 70s. They would have, an orchestra on one song and a saxophone player on the next song, and they would have a ballad song, and it was all pop music.
Right.
Even though it was, the Beach Boys would have, all kinds of crazy things going on. But, nowadays it seems like if it's got to be popular or it's going to be on the radio, a lot of people feel like, well, let's just make it all sound homogenous. And, I think it's really great when bands break out of that mold and say, no, let's challenge people. Because I think people want that. I think the listeners want to be challenged. It's kind of weird. It's like almost rock and roll has gone back. Rock and roll started out as something that people didn't really pay attention to. They just went to clubs and danced. Mm-hmm. And then it became something that people listened to. And then now it's kind of almost gone back to something that people just kind of play in the car really loudly and they don't pay attention to. So I think things go in cycles. And I think people are starting to really crave, interesting music again, that really challenges their mind. So at least that's my theory on why I'm doing what I do. So.
Right. No, and I hear you. And as much as I don't know that necessarily this would be something that you would care or pay attention to at this point anyway, but I think it's also very evident, especially in the Christian scene, because the Dove Award nominations just came out, and this is the second year that they've had no actual just straight ahead rock category. They did away with it, and now it's a rock contemporary category. So Skillet's in the same category as Crowder, and that's a little weird to me. But it's, I don't know. I think you're right. I think it's gone from becoming this kind of mainstream thing that was kind of the default for many people as a musical choice, to where now it is something that you have to look for, you have to seek out, and you may have to go to a smaller club to hear. And I think that has its own kind of mystique to it that I think is cool.
Yeah, with the passing of Chester Bennington from Linkin Park, it occurred to me, looking back, that Linkin Park was sort of that was one of the last eras where rock and roll dominated, or like heavy rock music was dominant across all the platforms. Mm-hmm. In the late 90s, early 2000s, the biggest bands, even in the general music community, were like Linkin Park and Korn, and bands like that were huge. And fast forward till now, if you have a guitar in your hand, people are kind of like, well, what are we supposed to do with you? Are you country? Are you contemporary? We don't know what you are. What is rock and roll? It's kind of
right.
It's a weird time, but I think that presents new opportunities. I think it's building from the ground up again, and that's exciting. I mean, when Nirvana came out originally, it was kind of like, what is this? What is this thing? And then they went, blew up. And so, anyway, I think you have to have a clear foundation before you can start building. So
sure thing. Well, but lest we get through this and me not ask this one question. By the way, I'm thoroughly enjoying this. I love discussing these things. So you're in a great spot. Since we're spinning the single "Wake Me When I'm Dead," let's talk about that song.
Yeah. So "Wake Me When I'm Dead" is actually one of the very last songs I wrote for the record. Mm-hmm. It is a song that came just out. Again, when I wrote this record, it was very much like a what comes out of my heart kind of thing, just naturally. When I just say what I've got to say, and Wake Me When I'm Dead was this cathartic line for me that was like, I need this every day. I need life every day, not just one time, spiritual regeneration through Christ, but I also need, like, some days I feel dead inside again, and I really need that life every day. And Death Therapy, the name of the band, it goes back to that same thing. We played some festivals this summer where we got some kind of weird looks from people who are kind of like, Death Therapy, what is this kind of scary name? And when we explain it to people, we're like, no, it's really talking about the importance of the Christian doctrine practice of dying to yourself every day, not just I went down the aisle, I signed, a prayer card, or I went down the aisle and, said the sinner's prayer, quote unquote, and I'm good. Now I got my get out of hell free card. It's just every day needing, to die to myself and also understand life, is through the process of having the death of Christ applied to me. So.
Cool. I like that. Now, how many times do you get asked if it has anything to do with the movie What About Bob?
Oh, we get asked that every time there's somebody in the room older than 30. Which given my background in other bands and stuff is pretty common that there's somebody there who's older than 30 and they get the joke. We have a What About Bob themed T-shirt that says "Don't Hackle Me. I listen to Death." From the movie, the shirt that Bill Murray wears. But we get those questions. But for the most part, I think it's been really cool to just sit and talk with people who they really don't know about my old band. They really don't know where I'm pulling this reference from, and just meet new people. And that's one of the cool things about the radio. And having a radio station, it's amazing to me to have a radio station playing our song, because I've never been a part of that before. My old band was very much like extreme heavy metal, not a radio kind of thing.
Right.
And so I guess what I'm saying is we're meeting a lot of new people, and a lot of people are telling me through email and through Facebook and other things that they heard this song "Wake Me When I'm Dead." They were in a dark place. They were they were depressed, or they were struggling with bad thoughts, and it really helped them. And ever since I started this band, that was my goal. Like on paper stated, this is my goal. I want to reach the people who are struggling and don't know what to do, because I've always felt a connection with that. So
nice. Now, do you find that, despite the fact that Becoming the Archetype was a very aggressive, extreme band, I mean, kind of an extreme metal band,
right?
Do you find that Death Therapy stands out more than Becoming the Archetype did? I mean, does it feel like does it feel more visible, I guess? And I know it's kind of hard to tell because you guys have put out one record on a label and you're still somewhat new as bands go, but what is your impression thus far?
It's been a whole new thing. It's been an interesting journey, because it's been sort of a question of how many people will be interested in this band knowing my past in that band, and how many people will come on who are brand new, who've never heard anything I've made musically. I mean, I'm 33 years old now. When I started in Becoming the Archetype, traveling and things like that, I was 20. I can remember we used to go on tour and have trouble finding a hotel room because nobody was old enough to get a hotel room, or we couldn't get a rental car because nobody was old enough for things like that. So at this point in my life, I've been around, I've seen it, and so it's really exciting to me to see that this is a different thing. It's a different crowd, it's a different group of people, and still got a long way to go to get the word out about Death Therapy. So that's the exciting part about talking to you and knowing that people are playing our music, because we just want to get it out there, and we want, like I said, we want to make a difference in those people's lives who feel like they don't have a voice, they don't have a song that says how they feel. We're trying to be that way. So
yeah, for sure. Well, what would you say is a challenge that either you were surprised by or was just new, going from Becoming the Archetype to being in, starting Death Therapy and recording a record and all that, even just playing live shows, I guess. But what would you say would be that thing as of now?
Well, definitely a new challenge is when there's just two people in the band. If I stop playing for any reason, it becomes painfully obvious. Whereas when I was in BTA, I was the bass player and the vocalist, which, the vocalist has an important role, and so does the bass player. I mean, I'm not going to belittle bass players. I'm I'm the guy who started the bass player's dream, right? Every bass player dreams of starting a rock band where they don't need a guitar player. So I'm living the dream, right? But at the same time, when there were two other guitar players in a heavy metal band, there were parts where I could put my bass down and go jump out in the crowd, with the microphone or something. If I put my bass down at any point during a death therapy set, it's over. We're done playing. There is no crowd, so it's a lot more pressure on me. I like to think that every challenge has new opportunities. Nobody plays guitar and bass. There's no guitar player and bass player in any band that's as tight as I am with myself playing guitar and bass at the same time. Right? So sometimes sometimes I'll jokingly tell people, I'm like, the only question you have to decide is, do you think I'm a better guitar player or bass player? And, because it's kind of hard to decide which one's which. But yeah, it's a new challenge, but it's also new opportunity.
Sure thing. Now, you guys have already done a music video for Wake Me When I'm Dead. What was that experience like?
It was awesome. The guy we shot the video with is a guy named Kevin Johnson, who actually lives nearby here in Atlanta, where we're from. And so it was really cool to get to work with him and not have to travel very far away to do a video, but also to have someone who's really at the top of the game. I mean, he's amazing. He's on fire. He just did a music video for Fit for a King, which is another band on our record label. And it's amazing to watch what Kevin can do. So we were really honored to do a video with him. And I think it turned out really cool. And there's a lot of themes in the video that, they may seem darker or spookier or scarier to some people.
No.
But again, that's one of those things with our bands that I kind of like, leaving a little bit of the mystery there, but then giving people the opportunity, if they ask, they can find out, it's coming from a very deeply rooted place of theological conviction. I mean, I know it sounds kind of snooty, but like, I have 2 master's degrees from seminary. I take my lyrics very seriously, and I'm actually I'm kind of that guy sometimes. When a band will put out a song, I'm like, did he really say that in the lyrics? So those guys. Maybe you're one of those, but
yes, I totally understand, mainly because and I don't know, I don't want to assume that I understand what every band member of every band is thinking, especially those who write the lyrics. But sometimes I'll just be sitting there listening to a new song that's supposed to be a single, and I'm just going, why would you say that, knowing that this is going, like, who's gonna play this?
Right, exactly. So yeah, I mean, I like it to be a little bit of a surprise to some people. Like I say, especially some of these festivals we'll play, we'll have somebody come up and maybe their 14-year-old daughter is with them, and you can tell she's really into, like, the heavier, darker kind of music, and Dad's not really sure. He's kind of like, I don't know about this death therapy. It sounds kind of scary, and then we get a chance to share what we're about and make a connection that I think goes deeper than if we were just kind of like, just a spooky band that didn't have anything behind it. We were just doing it all for shock rock or something. So.
Right. Yeah. You mean people do that?
No, nobody does that.
Sorry, I just couldn't help myself. So, what do you think is next for you guys? I mean, I gotta say, as a 2-person band, you've got to be more mobile than the average band of even a trio. I mean, it seems like it'd be easier to finagle schedules and whatnot.
I'll give you a really recent example.
Okay.
Of how it helps us to be a little bit more flexible. We're leaving tomorrow for a trip. We're going up to New York to play a festival in Horseheads, New York. I'm at a festival, and my transmission in my truck went out today.
Right.
And so what am I going to do? Well, I was able to find a rental vehicle that can fit 2 people in it, and our equipment, which is not that big of a deal because there's only 2 people. But if I had to have 5, a rental vehicle with 5 people and all this other kind of stuff and pulling a big trailer, it'd be much more difficult. So yeah, we do have some opportunities as a 2-person band. We can buy cheaper plane tickets and fly. Speaking of that, we're going to Europe to do a tour.
Oh, wow.
End of October, early November. And most bands our size, we're just getting started. We're not a very, huge band at this point or anything. Most bands our size couldn't afford probably to fly everyone over to Europe,
right,
to make a trip like that happen. But that's part of why I wanted to set it up the way I did. Some people will say, well, why don't you get a keyboard player, or have you thought about getting a guitar player? And I'm like, my goal is to create a band that's sustainable. More and more people, I think, have watched their favorite bands go away because either they got older, they started families, they got real jobs, quote unquote, these sorts of things. And they go, oh man, I wish that band was still around. I wish they were still making music, but they had to move on. Well, I've already been down that road. I quit one band to start a family, to get a real job. But now I want to be able to make music going forward that maybe I can make it as long as I'm able to make music. So sustainability is part of the setup. So yeah, we've got festivals coming up, European tour, hoping to hit the road again next year pretty hard, and just try to get out there as much as we can.
Nice. Well, and I've got a question that I think differing people, much like you said, backing tracks at one point were considered one of those things that was just really taboo in the rock world, much less the metal world. But I will ask a question that I think kind of falls into that same arena. Is there any plans to do any sort of remixes of the current stuff that you have out now?
Man, I hope so.
Okay.
I've definitely talked about that and mentioned it to a few people. Maybe what if one day we can do a special vinyl release of this album, because it hasn't been released on vinyl yet. We do a special vinyl release and maybe have some remix tracks on there included for people who really like that stuff. I think the way our record sounds, it really would lend itself well to remixes. And there's also, for people who check out the whole record, at the end of the record, there's sort of a special treat, couple tracks that are like a tribute to my love for classic video games.
Yeah.
Sort of an 8-bit heavy metal and instrumental kind of thing. And I've also talked about the idea of what if we could do like an 8-bit version of the album? How cool would that be? So somewhere in that neighborhood, I'm not putting anything, off the table. Okay. I would love to do something like that.
Cool. Well, hey, man, I think that's fantastic, and I think that's one thing that, if anything, kind of the change that has come with rock and roll that I think is kind of cool is that a lot of people got off their high horse about everything being like pure. It's like, no, it's got to be played exactly out of one instrument live. Maybe have pedals, but even that, well, I don't know.
Right.
But it's
we can't all be Bruce Springsteen and have 40 people on stage with us.
Right. Right.
And so
yeah. And that's one thing that I always find interesting is because, my show is based off of radio play charts. And so we may have an electronic dance music song and a hip hop song that for whatever reason are charting on the Christian rock charts. And it's part of it because that's what it's based off of. But I think at the same time, I think it's kind of like subtly given bands more permission to say, hey, what if we tried this? We wouldn't try this normally, but it feels like we're kind of in the same neighborhood as more people than we used to be. And, I think it kind of increases some inventiveness that can be interesting.
Yeah, and I also think you're onto something. And I've talked about this with other friends, but I think there's still people who are very cliquey about their music, but I think that's not as stark as it used to be. It used to be, when I was younger, it used to be you could go into the high school and you could almost go to the lunchroom and see like the kids who like this kind of music are sitting over here and they dress a certain way, and these kids who like this kind of music sit over here and they dress this kind of way. But now it's hard to tell what do people listen to. They kind of all like a little bit of everything, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree. Nice. Well, is there anything that you want to add? I just want to make sure I haven't left any stone unturned. Is there anything that you think that people might be interested to know, or any news that you got that you want to share to get out there?
No, I think we pretty well covered it. I just, it's one of those things where, like I said, I'm really honored to have people listening to our stuff. It's a new band. It's a new thing. And we're working hard to try to get it out there. I don't want people to think that, since it's a 2-man band, it's just a studio project. It's not. We're trying to get out and play as many shows as we can. We'll probably play close to 100 shows this year when it's said and done. And grateful to my wife and kids for allowing me to do that kind of thing. So, trying to make it work. Living the dream.